Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started? Good afternoon, welcome, and thank everyone for joining. We are excited to continue on with our webinar series. Today, we're going to be talking about migrations to Colleague SQL. But before we get started on that, just want to go over um, a couple of ground rules for today's webinar. First, everyone should have joined, and hopefully you entered on mute. We would like you to remain that way during the presentation so that we can keep down background noise and ensure that everyone can hear the information. So we would appreciate that. To ask questions, please feel free to ask them real time. We ask that you do that through the chat window. There is a chat icon at the bottom of the screen. If you click that, you'll be able to correspond with the entire group. So if you ask a question, we will either be able to get to that in that moment, or we will certainly circle back to it at the end. So if we don't get to it when you put it up, please know that we will definitely reference to it at the end of the presentation. Lastly, feel free to take notes, but we are recording the session, so you will have the ability to reference back to both the presentation as well as the slide deck. So with that, I will turn it over to Greg MacPhee and Karen Hupp.
Thank you, Stephen. Hello, everybody. My name is Greg MacPhee. I'm one of the directors of professional services here at Forelli. I'm also a project manager by trade. With me is Karen Hupp, who is one of our senior consultants. We work on the SQL migrations very closely, so I'm excited to be here today. I would like to start out with a quick poll over trying to find out when you are planning to migrate, if it's in 1 to 3 months, 1 to 2 years, 3 to 5 years, or what's SQL? Just let us know by selecting a poll. We'll let that go for a little bit. All right, so fantastic. It looks like we're pretty evenly split all over from the 1 to 3 months, 1 to 2 years, and 3 to 5 years. I'm glad everyone here knows what SQL is and is got a plan moving forward. So the goal of this conversation today is to look at what we need to do to get ready for a migration. First and foremost, we need to talk about the planning steps. We need to discuss all the items that we need to put in place before we actually get on the ground with the migration. Then we're going to go in all the technical considerations, talk about the data, talk about the custom, the actual migrations themselves. And then last, we're going to put together a general timeline on what you should be thinking about. But before you begin any of that, I think the greatest thing that needs to occur on your campus is we need to discuss why we're doing this. I will be honest, SQL migration is an IT process for the most part. You're not getting a new shiny UI, you're getting Colleague, albeit you're gonna see some performance boosts due to new hardware. But the reality is a lot of our end users are not going to be able to have something to show just for the actual migrations themselves. Where the power of the migration comes in is on those business process reviews, the decustomization of Colleague, and the reduction of our technical debt throughout the Colleague infrastructure. So really what we need to make sure is that we are messaging to all of our stakeholders across campus that we have a joint message that's going forward from everybody on the project, and that we're emphasizing all of these other wins other than getting that the shiny new widget that most of our implementations give us or require. So the migration overall, we're taking our unit data platform on Colleague and we're moving it to the SQL platform. Again, generally going to get new hardware out of that, so we're going to see some performance boosts, but in some cases that doesn't always occur. More importantly is the removal of all the custom code. In the unit data environment, we're very, there's a lot of leeway of when we can load code, computed columns especially. In the SQL environment, there is no way to do code, to push a computed column into production during the day. You have to do it during the downtime. So, removing the dependence on computed columns, all this custom, getting back to baseline Colleague, make sure that we can support that environment much better. Additionally, in the SQL environment, we'll have access to better reporting tools. get rid of some of the things that we are doing now, some of the hopefully query builder and things like that are going to go away. And we're going to hopefully push some advanced tools out for not only IR, but to the users as well. And more importantly than anything is SQL is the standard across the industry right now. Most of the tools we are buying are SQL backends, and having our ERP on that means integrations are going to be so much easier. But again, the most important thing, and something I'm going to harp on a lot during this conversation, is about getting our campus stakeholders, our campus partners on board with this migration. It is the key to success is having everyone aligned and making sure that all parties understand what we're doing and understand the reason why, and are feeling like they're participating in the process moving forward. So here at Forelli, we have an optimized approach to doing these. I don't love the term playbook here at Forelli because that assumes that we're going to come in and tell you how to do things. I actually like my analogy is a cookbook. So I have this recipe here at Forelli of things that we have to do, but we're going to look at your unique individual needs as an institution to determine each of these areas and figure out what is best for you. So first and foremost, organization is key to a project like this. We need to sit down, determine who is going to be involved. We need to identify all of the stakeholders. We need to start thinking about how we're going to manage this project, what tools we're going to use, how we're going to distribute information. And again, in this very first stage, we also want to start doing the inventories. What are all the customizations? What are our reporting tools? What are our integration points? Really identifying all the pieces that are entwined with Colleague so that we can have a plan for each one of those moving forward. And then we move into that foundational area where we are looking at what we call the BPR, is the business process review. So what we are looking at those is having these deep dives with each user area to determine what they're doing in the system. And I guarantee there's someone on your campus doing something that no one else is aware of. They own a process that's been handed down from staff member to staff member. It's probably not well documented. Probably a lot of people don't know what they're doing, but it's one of those things at the tactical level that is critical to their operations. But it is not well documented. So what we want to do during these BPRs is to surface all of those small processes throughout your organization, identify them, document them, and determine whether or not they're still needed. In this first phase, we'll also build up those SQL environments, get them ready to land the data. And then we'll start the very critical piece of doing the custom code reviews and the cleanup, which is something that's going to ongo the entire process because we are always going to encounter data errors throughout. But hopefully we'll get those big ones out of the way early on, and then we'll just be working on the employee bad enter data. And then we move into the technical phase, which is the actual decustomization. We are going to hopefully remove as many computed columns, X screens or mnemonics, all of those custom subroutines that live out there. We want to minimize that to shrink our operational footprint in that SQL environment. Again, SQL is not as forgiving as Unidata in loading applications. So we definitely want to bring that down. And then in this time, this is where some of our BPRs are going to actually determine that we need some custom development. So believe it or not, while we're trying to minimize it, in some cases, there's going to be a need to fix a business process that is currently broken, and that we are going to build a custom process to address that issue. We see it all the time at our client sites. They do things that are required through federal or state regulations, and they need to do something that Delivered Colleague doesn't do very well. Currently, they have a lot of manual processes. We want to fix that. And again, in this area, we are going to start looking at our reporting strategy, what tools we want to do a tool assessment throughout, and see how we push our reporting tool out to the users so that people can actually get the data. And then we move into the data migration. That's the fun part. We've kind of worked that down to a science at this point. We generally do 3 migrations, what I call test runs. Our first one is just to build our baseline. Second one is to provide a UAT, or user acceptance testing environment. And then the third one is a dry run to get all the timings. And then the last and most important is the go live. By that time, we should have everything in place, all the custom code, all the clean data, even though we know we're going to get some here and there, but the bulk of the data will be clean. And then we'll push all that data over into the SQL environment. And it's very important for your campus to understand at that point, there is no more unit data. I've had multiple clients tell me, well, if it doesn't work, we'll just go back. There is no going back. We go to SQL once and we're there. And so we'll talk a little bit about that in the planning stages, but we definitely want to make sure that we're communicating that these migrations, this is a permanent thing. And once we land in the SQL environment, we are there for good. And then obviously we have our go live. That's where we need to hook in all those integrations, all the reporting tools. We need to make sure that the users can get in and do everything. And obviously we're there to provide support. And I think there's one thing that I always like to do on this stage, and that's to celebrate the win. I'm always excited when clients cut over. I think it's a great time to look at how the entire process has gone and do some follow up and ensure that the teams are celebrating. So let me dive into some of this. I'm going to focus on the project side. Karen will focus on the technical side. So I want to dig in a little bit about planning the project. And again, we've all dealt with projects in our lives in higher ed. But this one is pretty big. It's going to touch every single aspect of your operation at your institution. And I have been on multiple projects like this where stakeholders are not aware of what's happening. So we really need to leverage those change management tools that we have and make sure that we are communicating extremely well outward to all stakeholders on the project. So first and foremost, we need to identify the scope of work. The goal in a SQL migration is not just the migration, but that reduction of custom code. I cannot stress that enough. Just migrating to SQL, taking 1,200 computed columns is not ideal. You can't support them. Taking 150 recustomizations of delivered code is not what we want to do here. So not only do we want to migrate to SQL, we want to get rid of all of this legacy code and technical debt that is sitting out there that we have to support. For the project organization, we need to select a tool that allows multiple stakeholders access. We can share information across our campus. And to be honest, in these COVID times, we also need to think about how we're doing this maybe remotely. We've done our migrations thus far have the last couple have been done completely remotely. It does bring a new twist onto things. As we go live, we can't pull people together in one room. We have to do that virtually. So just be mindful of how, when you are building out your project organization, that you are thinking about how these tools can be used remotely and in person if we move back into that stage in the next few months. Obviously, with the project plan, I get asked this all the time when I talk about project plan. Do we use waterfall? Do we use agile? And I say yes. I use every tool available to me to get this project done. So personally, I think the entire project can be run through a waterfall style. This is something we know what's going to be done. But there are pieces of the project that I think are absolutely designed for an agile mindset, especially around things like custom code and data cleanup. Those are really great places where, a Kanban style, where we queue everything up and developers can pull the work as needed, and that to have those Scrum meetings are powerful. So I think there's a really good use case to do multiple types of project management in here. Additionally, the communications plan, I cannot stress this one enough. If you're thinking about SQL, you really need to think about, how do I communicate to a incoming freshman that our system may be down for a period of up to 5 days during this period in the future. So when we talk about communications, I think we think about, okay, IT needs to tell the offices what they're doing. But our stakeholders in a SQL migration are anyone that touches our campus. And so it's really critical that we're using every communication stream that we have, from social to email to text to the bulletin boards on a physical campus, to make sure that we are spreading the word that this is coming, that we are using our sales hat to say this is why we're doing it, and that we have a unified communication strategy from day one. The biggest danger in these is that, a month before go live, one of the VPs has no clue what SQL stands for, nor why we're going to it, and they want to review decisions that have been made 6 months ago. So again, that communications plan, I always say we need to make sure that we're communicating our VPs, our staff, our students, and then all the campus stakeholders that may not even be associated with the campus right now. So web pages, things like that are great places to start. We also need to define our parameters really closely, especially around things like the user acceptance testing. To me, that's the crux of this project. If we don't have good UAT, the project is most likely going to fail. And every issue I've encountered on one of these migrations is because something was missed in that UAT. So we really need to make sure that all the stakeholders involved in the planning of the project, that we have the right people on the steering teams, the core teams, and then that we define our success and we know what done is. We joke here at Forelli about, is it done or is it done? And on this project, getting to SQL isn't enough. We can get you to SQL pretty easily, but we need to define what is done. Does that mean all the integrations are complete, that you've pushed out a new reporting strategy, that all the custom that you need developed is developed? Is there something that you're going to hold over and do in the SQL world? Is all the, there's so many questions about what is done, that identifying that early on is going to be critical. So let's talk a little bit about those BPRs, business process reviews. I live in DC. Everything's a 3-letter acronym, or TLA. So I call them BPRs. Again, we use here at Forelli, we use that interview approach. We meet with staff throughout all the business offices. We ask questions. We ask why. We ask, what do you do with this? And then when we hear something, we hone in on it and try to focus on why they're doing that. My staff, every time we talk to staff, they are doing the best they can with the tools they have. And sometimes they're doing things that don't make sense in the colleague environment because they don't know any better. And it's really important that we understand right out of the gate that process change is hard. People need to see that they're going to get something out of it. So selling this SQL migration, where most end users don't get anything, the BPRs and the correction of those business processes will give them that tangible outcome that they are going to desire, and will get them to be what we call positive stakeholders on the project instead of negative stakeholders. So on top of the interview approach, we do take a deep technical dive into Colleague, ancillary systems. Are you on Recruit? Are you on ImageNow? What are the things that are touching Colleague? What are the other systems that you use? I'm always amazed at how many systems we uncover, how many shadow databases that pop up, how many times that someone says, well, I just dump all this data onto my desk, I massage it, and then I push it over to Word, and then we massage it some more. And when you start calculating these processes, you see how many hours are used in doing all this manual work, when in most cases, it can be automated with the right person in the room walking you through that. And a lot of times when we do these BPRs, we ran into one recently where someone was doing something that was taking them hours to process. And we said, well, you can just automate that. And we just fixed that right on the spot. It was a great, I know the office was like, wow, this is fantastic. So those things are coming up. The goal here isn't to produce documentation. While we do produce that, we're really here to produce business processes that will support your staff and your students in the SQL environment and into the future. So what do we want to come out of these BPRs? We want to reduce registration barriers. Ultimately, why I love Forelli is everything is about the student. So hopefully, if we are doing our job correctly in these BPRs, your staff is going to become more efficient doing their business. Therefore, they're going to be able to help students more. ultimately, students are going to be able to run through your processes more, get enrolled faster, get registered faster, and hopefully we are going to reduce that custom code for you. We're going to get rid of the bad data sitting out there, getting rid of bad dates that may have blocked registration or blocked a student from doing something. And then again, ultimately looking at, I always say this, when we talk about labor costs, I want people doing high value work and not doing redundant manual data entry pieces that some of our systems can do for us already. And now we're going to dive over into the technical optimization with Karen Hupp.
Hey, thanks, Greg. And just like Greg told you, we've been through a few of these so far and together co-managing. So it's great to talk to you folks about our experiences today. So let's start with the technical optimization. What can you gain from going from a Unidata to a SQL and through this migration? So first off, updates to your infrastructure. You're going to have newer equipment. This means less downtime. It means improvements to your system maintenance procedures. And since this is migrating to SQL, SQL is a more standard tool in the industry today, unlike Unidata. It's going to be an easier skill set to find employees to support your daily operations. Also, code customization. Greg talked a little bit about this, but this is an opportunity to re-engineer and improve business processes while going back to baseline Colleague. Ellucian may have delivered processes since you put your custom in place. This is an opportunity to reevaluate that and take advantage of that functionality that they've released. It will also make loading Ellucian software updates easier and more timely. You're not bogged down because of the custom that you've got to redo before you can get those software updates in your production environment. So you won't have that in the way. Also, your data cleanup and transformation. You're going to be cleaning up your data. Otherwise, it's not going to migrate to SQL. But also, this is an opportunity to do any kind of cleanup, transformation in that process. So not only can you convert the data, but we can write processes that will, oh my gosh, combine and consolidate academic programs, clean up data, change any of your historical data if you want it to look different. We had one site that recoded and did a re-implementation of Colleague while we went through this, and I'll tell you about a little bit of what they did. Totally transformed and re-implemented Colleague. Also, this is an opportunity to look at a new reporting strategy. Currently, if you're using things like UniQuery and Query Builder, and it's okay to say that you are, if you are, you're not alone. We're finding clients that are still using these tools because they always have. They haven't had a chance to go to a different reporting tool. Well, this is the time because you have to. If you're using Unidata specific reporting tools, you don't have a choice. Okay, so there can be a lot of gain here just by implementing this one new feature, going through this migration. So a SQL migration offers you an opportunity to rethink all your pain points, okay? Whether it's your data, bad data, whether it's got a lot of custom, whether it's your reporting solution you're using, whatever, it's a way to just step back and evaluate. Is there a better way to do some things? What are our pain points? And what do we need to do better? Okay, so let's talk about infrastructure management. Now, this is in regards to the migration. Here's some things you need to think about and you need to plan for. Specifications of equipment and software. Buying machines and having good specs is critical. You don't want to get migrated and find out that it's not going to be big enough to support your Colleague environment, okay? And also, you need to have a strategy for managing the migrations to SQL. And so what I'm talking about is how many data migrations are you going to be going through? Usually we recommend about 4. Okay, 3 test migrations and 1, your final go live migration. But you're going to have to think about, given your situation, How many will you have to go through? Also, user acceptance testing. After each one of those data migrations, those test data migrations, are you going to have your users log into Colleague and test their business processes? Also printing, okay? You're going to have to rethink your printing because direct printing out of Colleague doesn't work the same in a SQL migration. So Ellucian has updated a lot of the features for printing in Colleague over the years. I mean, you have the option now to do things like Envision PDF printing. They've incorporated a save as feature when you browse reports to hold, and you can save those on a local drive. And then you could use your network printers to print out your documents and your reports. One thing you do need to start thinking about is your special forms though. You know, in Colleague, we had all those Colleague printers set up and we had to maintain them. And we had special printers set up to handle those special forms. That's not the case in SQL, okay? So you're gonna have to think about what other printing options are you gonna put in place to handle all this. As Greg talked about, integrations, okay? Your e-commerce is a big one. You gotta have students that right off the bat on day one can make a payment, right? You've also got other integrations and third-party software that you're gonna have to hook up. Well, you're going to want to figure out how you're going to have a test environment that can hook these migration or these integrations up, and even like e-commerce, whether it's Nelnet, whether it's TouchNet, whether you're using Ellucian's e-commerce solution. This is something that's definitely a high priority, and you're going to have to test in your test environments. And also, don't forget about self-service. Okay, you'll want it hooked up. More and more things are being done in self-service. So you're going to want to test that as well. So a lot of things to plan there as you're thinking through and strategizing your migration. And Greg talked about managing custom code. Okay, think about, how are you going to decide what is brought over to SQL? You know, are you going to have that reviewed and approved by a steering committee? Or is there going to be another group, another person or a group of people that are going to approve that custom so that it can move forward? And then for any custom code that is getting migrated, are you going to fix it on Unidata or are you going to fix it in SQL? Okay, so here's some decisions that you need to start thinking about and planning for. As far as managing computed columns, well, it's a little bit different in a SQL environment. It's not as easy to get them installed. It's a little bit frustrating. It takes a lot of time. There's a lot of labor. So are you going to only bring over what is needed? And how do you go out and identify what you need? Okay, what you really need. And think, you know, and if you think back, a lot of your computed columns for your reporting needs, what you used in UniQuery and possibly Query Builder or other unit data specific reporting tools. And that may not be the case. You may not need those anymore. So, you know, I think it's going to depend on volume. Okay, if you go out and look at the number of custom computed columns that you have, if you've got 100, well, that's no big deal. I would scoop them up and I would bring them over, okay, and install them. It's going to take you longer to sort out what you use and don't use than if you just scooped them up and got them over. Now, we had a client that had almost 7,000, okay? That was a whole different story. You know, we tried packaging them all up and install them over SQL. And that was just one frustration after another, because during the installation, they would hang, okay? Until you got them fixed, they would hang. And it was very difficult to install. So, you know, what you do and how you manage your computed columns as far as migrating them, I think it's going to come down to volume. Okay, and I'll talk a little bit more about this. Now, while you're going through all this during your migration, okay, you're going through these test migrations, you got to keep in mind that you've also got a Colleague production environment to keep running. Okay, it's got to have software updates installed, and possibly you've got customizations going into production. You know, how are you going to keep track of what's going into your Colleague production environment to make sure that those updates and any custom changes are going into your SQL migrations, going into your SQL environments, I should say, okay? So you're going to have some kind of tracking system, procedures in place to make sure that whatever's been installed in your unit data environments is also being installed and done in your SQL environments. Okay, so moving on to custom code cleanup. So eliminating custom code, and Greg has talked a lot about this. This is a big deal, okay? Some of us may be 20-year clients. I was at a client site, we had lots of custom. And in the beginning days of DataTel, Colleague, okay, that's what they sold their product on. You can buy our product and you can customize it to make it your own, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if you had stuff out there from 20 years ago that's still being used, and also have stuff out there that you have no idea what it is. Well, you're going to have to start going through that custom and identifying if you need it or not. This is the time to see if Ellucian has delivered that same functionality in their base product. And it's time to go to move to implementing it and just obsoleting yours, okay? And we haven't always had the time when they deliver the software updates. I know when I was a director at a client site, I couldn't stop projects that I was doing just because they released functionality on software updates. And sometimes our custom process involved multiple offices, and to rethink all that to get over to what they delivered, it wasn't always easy or the right time, but now's the time. How about integration redesign? Integrations. So the trend is moving away from flat file transfers and more towards real-time integrations through APIs and that sort of thing. So the custom code isn't needed anymore. Take a look at what all your integrations are and the customizations are. Is there a better way of doing it? Like more real-time integrated, like maybe using Ellucian delivered integrations like Ethos, maybe ILP or others? And is it something that you can put in place that would improve the timing where the updates happen immediately? So look at your integrations, because some of your custom is probably due to those. Obsoleting unnecessary code. Yes, you're going to want to run the custom code scanners. This is going to tell you what you've got in your colleague developments, LPRs, right? It's not necessarily going to give you what you've got that's old Unibasic code laying around. Remember those old custom source directories that we had, paragraphs, the non-envision compliant stuff like download. Oh, everybody had Cedarville download, right? That was a great tool. Well, guess what? That stuff is not going to work in a SQL environment. So you're going to have to find out what stuff you have, and then you're going to have to determine if you still need it, and you're going to want to obsolete what you don't use at all. Okay. Now, and the reason is because the custom that you do bring over, there's a cost involved in this. You've got to resequelize it. In other words, what I'm saying, you may have to, even though it's envisionized, if it has any kind of database specific Unidata commands in it, you're going to have to rewrite that. And that's going to take time. Okay. So, and things like voc paragraphs, Unibasic programs that aren't envisioned at all. Okay. That's like starting from scratch. So first thing is to go out and find it all. Try to decide if you need it. Best case is use Ellucian delivered functionality if it's been delivered. And then if you do need to bring it over, well, just be aware it takes a little bit of time to get it working in a SQL environment. So we talked about computed columns earlier, okay? And I said it's going to depend on how many you've got as to what you bring over. And again, you know, if you use some of those unit data specific reporting tools like UnoQuery at the colon prompt, Query Builder, well, most of those computed columns were built and in place for those reporting tools, okay? We recommend that you don't bring them all, okay? Take a look at what you really use. And if you had to go out and search and get a list, what you're going to want is look at your computed columns that you use in rules, your list specs from your Envision processes, parameter screens, things like communications management, okay? take a look that you have in there, and that's what we would recommend bringing over. One other thing you're going to want to take a look at is what you've got running in cron. Okay, no more running in cron. Find all those jobs. If you've got cron jobs out there scheduled, no, those are going to all be moving into the process handler. Don't forget them. You need to go out and look and see what you've got out there. Okay. So custom code outcomes, what do you hope to gain? First, the reduction or elimination of code, especially if it's already been delivered. You're going to want a smaller custom footprint, elimination of all the junk, stuff that you've accumulated over the years. And if the longer you've been a client, the more junk you're going to have. And if you have a smaller custom footprint, it's going to make it more clear what custom you have and why you have it. It's going to be less time to update software updates delivered by Ellucian. You know, the first thing when you install those things in your development or test environments, you've got to run custom impact. And you've got to identify, and it will identify for you, custom processes you've put in place that they are now redelivering. Okay, well, you've got to install the software updates, and then your team, your IT team, has to put those customizations back in place. So this is getting rid of this custom as much as you can. You'll be able to get these new updates into production sooner and with a lot less work. You're going to have more transparency because now everyone sees what's on the custom list. They know what's there. They know what it's for. And also it gives you more time to focus on, you know, what's delivered in the software and find creative ways to use it. Instead of spending time redoing custom and getting some of this other stuff working, now you can concentrate on what's delivered. And how many of us over the years, when we had an issue before us, something we had to solve, how many did we think, oh, I can write a custom process to take care of that? Sorry, I muted myself. Maybe we didn't do due diligence on what Ellucian had delivered. Okay, now we'll have time to do that. Okay, so data cleanup. Data that's not cleaned up, it will not move to SQL. Okay, an error on one field in a record will cause the entire record not to migrate. There are data scanners that are delivered that will help you find the data out there that's called bad data. Okay, so when we're talking about data, this is things like numbers and texts and dates, right? Whereas keys are more like codes and IDs of records. But your scanners are going to look at all of this, and anything that is not conformed to the field size and type. In other words, the data element specifications, because SQL enforces those. Anything that does not conform to the field size and type on that data element is going to error out. This is going to be things like data too long. Oh my gosh, addresses. Okay, unit data is very forgiving. You can import addresses that are 50 characters long, but really the address field is what, a 30-character field? Well, you're going to get hundreds of error messages, and you're going to have to go and clean that up. What if it's in the wrong format? If you've got numeric data in an alphanumeric field, that's going to be okay. But the other way around, alphanumeric data in a numeric defined field, that's not going to work. It's going to error out. So, you know, one thing we got to make sure that you understand the difference is, it's when we say bad data, it's what does not fit the requirements of the field size and type. Okay, this isn't like, oh, we've got a mess in our institutions file and we need that cleaned up. That's not what we're talking about, bad data. Okay, that data has issues, but the scanners and this data migration will not clean that up. Okay, things like maybe you've built academic levels and you wish you hadn't. Okay, and it's not working well in your system. I'll give some examples of this in a minute. your data scanners in this cleanup won't take care of that. So in many cases, we may want to write utilities. If this is the volume of errors are the same and the complexity, depending on how complicated it is to clean up manually, we may want to write processes to clean up the data, okay? But just be aware, there's going to be some manual data entry as well to clean this up. We don't know, or the person running these migrations, they don't know what the date should be. It's an invalid date. But no one in IT or Ferrelli would know what that data should be, what that date should be. So your users are going to have to get involved, and there will be some manual cleanup of this data as well. You know, one thing we encourage too is when you see things, bad data, you know, that's showing up on your scans and through the DMIGs, the data migrations, find the source of it. One of the things I bet, here's two things that we've always found source of, and Greg's smiling. Yes, we always see it in every migration. Users love to cut and paste out of Word documents or other sources and paste, you know, they cut it out of one source, a Word document, and paste it into a comment field in Colleague. That's a 100% chance of having error out on the data migration, okay? So get them to stop that. Okay, maybe they need to pull it into Notepad++ and take a look at it and get all those escape sequences out of there first. Okay, any imports into Colleague. Okay, here's another one. You know, if you're importing from any third-party systems, whether it be in admissions, whether it be within your Colleague financials, whatever, you know, they're known for bad data. Okay, again, importing sequences, you know, escape sequences that don't mesh well, or even fields or data that's too long and doesn't adhere to the field size and type. Okay, one thing I'm going to mention, custom code inventories, data cleanups, start doing those now. Okay, these are things that if you do them now, and sometimes it will take, depending on how much you got, a couple years. Do them now. This is going to make a difference on how smooth and how well your data migration project goes. And I'm just going to share one experience, wonderful experience that Greg and I had in December. We brought a client live on SQL. First weekend of December, and they told us they had their data cleaned up. Okay, we're not always, you know, we're usually a little skeptical. Okay. But we ran that first data migration and it was squeaky clean. They had worked hard to get their data cleaned up, and we could tell. It was down to like 13 files that had errors, okay? And not many errors at all. When we asked them to clean up that first round of errors from the data migration, it took them a day, okay? It was no big deal. We had never seen that before. It was awesome. Not only that, they had already been through all their custom code. They have it all inventoried. They had it also prioritized. They had a different spreadsheet for their high priority processes, their medium priority processes, and their low priority processes. And they handed it to us on a silver platter, okay? Now, this was a very competent client. They could have done this SQL migration. It's just that they did not have enough resources. This is a heavy lift. They needed Ferrelli to come in and add more bodies to their team and actually help them get this work done. It was a 6-month project, 6-month timeline. And because Ferrelli, this was one of the shortest timelines we've ever had. Ferrelli put 2 project managers on this so we could have a double set of eyes on it, make sure nothing was missed. So Greg MacPhee and myself were co-project managers on this. Hindsight, yes, we got them migrated in 6 months. And if I had to do hindsight on this, I think it would have been possible to get them there in 4 months. And that's due to the work that they did ahead of time to prep for this SQL migration. They cleaned up their data, number one, and they had all their custom code. They decided what they were going to do with it. They had an inventory and they had it prioritized. They did that before we even walked in the door. So your data cleanup outcomes, here's some things to think about. You get this data cleaned up, phone numbers or other fields. Maybe they weren't formatted correctly, or they were stored in the wrong place. Well, that really makes reporting difficult, okay? Almost impossible. You'll come out with good data, at least things stored in the right place. User fields. We've seen some really creative uses of user fields, used for many, many things. One of the things the most memorable, we had a client that used one of the user fields for their GL distribution, okay, for billing over on 20 million records. And that was longer than the field size and type and errored out on the data migration. So we had to reevaluate all of that, what it was being used for, how could we incorporate that into Lucian's delivered colleague in the billing process, and that's what we did. Now, there's another outcome of this. If you do decide to do any kind of data transformation, and what I'm talking about, and here's what you need to think about, what are your pain points, okay? We've seen several clients now create new academic levels over the years, okay? They thought this might be a good way to do academic levels other than undergrad and graduate, right? Well, then after they get it in place and they start working with it, they find out that it starts breaking things like curriculum management, like degree audit, GPA calculations and credit calculation, getting out and producing a transcript. What do you do when you have a student's academic history under 2 academic levels and you're trying to create a transcript? Well, what you got to do is you've got to get your IT to do the programming behind the scenes to bring it all into one. Okay, and not only that, how does this, when you have data like this or setup issues like this, how does this affect your moving ahead with the Lucian delivered functionality? Things like self-service and student planning. If you've got data on a student under multiple academic programs, active academic programs, how are you going to be able to move to their latest and greatest? So this is an opportunity to not only migrate your data, but transform your data. And we've done some consolidation of academic levels and even more transformation for clients. And actually, we did one full re-implementation of Colleague for a client that had multiple academic levels that we migrated. And so what we did in this situation of full implementation, we met with each of their colleague areas over the 6 to 8 weeks, all departments. We redefined codes. We redefined the setup in Colleague, and then we wrote processes to transform that data as we migrated them through to SQL. This was not only a re-implementation of Colleague, it was a migration from Unidata to SQL. And we also took them to the cloud at the same time. And we were successful in doing that. So think about your pain points, your data pain points, and because this is an opportunity to transform. If you got junk out there, situation you don't like, think about it. This is possible. And also don't forget about custom data and moving all that data out of user fields into somewhere else in Colleague. Okay. So let's talk about reporting strategy. I think we've only got about 10 more minutes left. This can be a challenge or it can be an opportunity. One of the greatest gains moving to a SQL migration. Think about the current data sources of all your informational systems. Where's your data coming from? Not only Colleague, you probably have some other systems that you need to pull data out of. What tools are you using now? Query Builder? How about the ODS? Do you want to stay with the ODS? Do you want to go with something else? Who develops the reports? What model are you using? Does IR, institutional research, generate all the reports? Or do you need to get away from this model and get your end users, give them a tool that they can write and generate reports themselves? Don't forget about training as you're going through this. And as you're deciding on your reporting tool, think about the most critical reports that your university generates. These are usually around institutional research, outside agency reports, enrollment statistics, historical reporting. This is usually the most difficult. Then also probably next in line is the financial statements, what's done in the business office. So, okay, user acceptance testing, testing the new model. You're going to want your users to get in and test after you've done your data migrations. Test, they're gonna log into Colleague and they're gonna do their business processes and work like they usually do. It's not going to look any different to them. They're going to develop test scripts and they're going to identify scenarios that they're going to walk through and make sure everything is working. This is also a great way to align your business process if you've re-engineered anything. And it's a great way to conduct unit testing, multi-department type testing. I call this critical path of Colleague, or the life cycle of the student. You admit a student in admissions, you roll them over to become a registered student, you package financial aid, you bill them, you post your daily business activity to your Colleague financials at the end of the day. If that works, you're going to be successful in coming live when on your go live date. So not only that, you've got to communicate to folks, stakeholders, and clients, okay? This isn't just your Colleague users involved now. You've got self-service out there, you've got integrations involved. You're gonna have to involve other people besides your Colleague users in your testing process. This takes a little bit more planning. Also, don't forget, if you're moving to a new reporting solution, you're gonna wanna test those new reports that are developed. Okay, just got a few minutes left, but let's think about go live. This is something you're really going to want to plan for. Communicate the plan widely, staff, faculty, also students. You're going to have system downtime. They're not going to know why they can't get into self-service and pay their bill, okay? So it affects everyone at your university. Not only that, we always put together a checklist. There's hundreds of steps to get a client live on SQL. And we always have when those are going to start, the estimation of how long it's going to take, who's going to do it, when they should be completed. And we coordinate this go live checklist with the client's IT staff. We all sit in this document, we put it somewhere in Teams, it's online. Whoever completes a task, they mark that done. We all know, no matter what time of day it is, and these migrations run 24 hours a day, we know where that migration stands. And it's got to be down to this level of detail and timed out. It's got to be a sequence of events, and it's got to go like clockwork. This is your go live weekend. Once you get your data migrated, your go live, you want to get your users in to look at it, validate that it's good to go, find all the issues with it, and then you're going to say to them, okay, given what issues have been discovered, are these showstoppers, or are we ready to open this up to all the Colleague users and campus the next morning? Okay, so you're going to have to make the decision. Not only that, like Greg said, celebrate. Okay, stop, take a look back, get your team to turn around, get the list out of everything that you've accomplished, because people put a lot of effort into this and they're doing their day jobs at the same time. And just a thank you and recognizing people. It's just, you got to celebrate. You just got to do it. Okay, so the outcomes really quick: modern infrastructure, documented operating procedures, significant customization reductions, reporting improvements, and you can feel these gains, then that'll give your staff the ability to focus on continuous improvement. Questions?
Perfect. We actually did have some questions quickly to get through. The first one was from Joe, and I want to make sure, since they were in the chat, that everyone had a chance to hear them as well. So what are the mnemonics for Colleague for the data scanners? So Greg, did you want to take that? Because I know Kelly had responded in chat in real time.
The delivered is CDSU. However, Forelli has custom data scanners that we use with our clients. And then, you're also, those CDSU is not going to pick up everything. The actual DMIG1 will identify additional areas of concern when you first run that. So, but CDSU will pick up most of them.
Okay. Okay, and OFA and GL file suites, how far back would you go? We have been on Colleague. We've been Colleague users since 1995. Any thoughts on that, about how far back to go?
I would echo what Kelly is saying. You know, I want to look at the institution and talk to them about their needs. Some have record retention policies that are you know, a decade. Some are a little bit less than that. So it's tough to give a blanket statement on that one. But I would say we would work with each institution individually to determine what their needs are and make a decision on what needs to come over and what can stay behind.
Okay.
You know, and you might want to look at the areas that have the highest volume number of records within AR billing, all those invoice items, payment items. That's going to be your number one. We've seen some clients over 20 million records just within that one area. So depending on your volume, that's going to help you make your decisions too.
Great point, Karen. All right. Thank you. Any other questions? Feel free to add them in a chat, or now that the presentation's over, feel free to come off of mute and we can talk about them live. Okay. If you do have any questions or you want to ask them in a one-on-one setting, we certainly will hang out here for a little bit longer to, if you want to stay on, and we can certainly answer any questions at that point. But want to thank you for joining. If you do have anything that pops up or you would like to speak to us directly, feel free to email at info@forelli.com. And we certainly will be more than willing to have a conversation about anything you've heard today. Additionally, please feel free to check up on upcoming webinars, as we will continue to keep this going as we are continue through the spring. At least we're thinking that the fall kind of will open up and conference season will start, and we'll be able to get out and get in front of folks. But until then, we will continue our webinar series. If you have suggestions, you can also email us at info@forelli.com, and feel free to take a look at Forelli/what's happening, and it will let you know, what's coming up in the future. All right. Thank you very much. Until next time, we look forward to hearing from you. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.